Toss-up 1. This ability was visualized in mathematical diagrams consisting of two cylinders joined at an obtuse angle by G.G.J. Rademacher and J.W.G. Terbrach. For a study of this ability published in Nature in 1894, Etienne Jules Marie used a proto-photographic gun to show that it was accomplished via a tuck-and-turn method. In Islamic tradition, this ability was bestowed by the touch of Muhammad's hand after a creature owned by Abu Huraira saved Muhammad from a snake. A 1988 paper by Wayne Whitney and Cheryl Melhoff found that over 90% of survivors of sufferers of high-rise syndrome survived, many with jaw injuries, largely because of this reflex. Physiologically, this reflex...
The mammalian diving reflex?
-5. Physiologically, this reflex kicks in based on input from the vestibular system and is facilitated by a free-floating collarbone and a very flexible spine. Because this reflex depends mostly on the movement of the hind legs and not the tail, it is present in the tailless Manx species. For 10 points, name this reflex that helps falling felines avoid injury.
Like cats always landing on their feet.
That's right.
Yeah.
The righting reflex? The righting reflex. Here's your bonus. This compound can be formed when beryline undergoes a di-pi-methane rearrangement, for 10 points each. Name this isomer of cyclooctatetraene, named for its similar structure to a fluxional molecule.
I'm so confused. Like...
Answer?
Boline?
Sorry?
Bovaline?
I have semi-bovaline.
Motherfucker.
The mechanism of the photoconversion of beryline to semi-bovaline can be analyzed using a scrambling technique named for these entities, which also name a kinetic effect in which a reaction rate changes with the substitution of one of these things.
Isotope.
Yes. Semi-bovaline is named for bovaline, a molecule that constantly undergoes a degenerate example of this 3,3 sigmatropic rearrangement of a 1,5-diene.
Coke.
20. 2. Fandler's 2D form of this technique uses two encode pulses followed by a delay and then an observed pulse. That form of this technique can be used to study the kinetics of the ionization of methane. This technique can induce motion by using a single swift pulse or a radio frequency sweeping chirp excitation pulse. The primary source of signal decay in that form of this technique is due to ion-neutral collisions. This technique processes data from an image current generated from ions passing near a detector plate to generate a free induction decay. The orbit trap is an alternative to this technique.
Time of flight?
-5. That does not require a superconducting magnet. Dividing the magnetic field by the frequency this specific technique yields the mass-to-charge ratio. For 10 points, name this extremely high-resolution form of mass spectrometry in which a Penning trap causes ions to undergo cyclotron motion.
FTICR?
10.
Yeah.
Bonus. In this piece, the tenor prays to God to give ear to his prayer and is later accompanied by a shrieking wordless women's voices as he lists the crimes of the wicked, for 10 points each. Name this piece for tenor solo, chorus, and orchestra written to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the union of Buddha, Pest, and Obuda.
I got nothing. Yeah, I don't know.
Answer? This is Psalmus Hungaricus. This composer of Psalmus Hungaricus used a musical sneeze to open his Hare Janos suite. He lends his name to a method of musical instruction that emphasizes folk music in the mother tongue and combines solfege with hand motions to teach pitch.
Kodai.
Yes. The fourth movement of the Hare Janos suite depicts the defeat of Napoleon by turning a rousing march into a slow solo for this instrument. Maurice Ravel used this instrument to depict a troubadour singing at a castle.
Okay, so in Pictures at an Exhibition, Old Castle is saxophone?
Answer? Sorry?
Saxophone?
20.
Yeah.
3. A woman in this story shows with expressive face how interested she is, how impressed, as her dinner companion describes his plans to expand his business. After weeping due to the terrifying sun and fleeing to the men's room, a character in this story returns to watch people making a seemingly eternal circuit on a merry-go-round. This story's protagonist shouts, "What are they doing? Don't they know what they're doing?" after two people argue over entering a fortune teller's booth. In the last sentence of this story, the narrator wakes into the bleak...
This is the Sarayan thing. This is In Dreams Begin Responsibilities.
10.
Nice.
Bonus.
I have no idea what that is.
This book notes that John Updike worries no more about his readers than does Rabbit about his women, for 10 points each. Name this 1978 John Gardner book that set off a firestorm by attacking the shallowness of established writers such as Updike and Robert Cooper and arguing that great art offers a vision unmistakably and unsentimentally rooted in love.
Is it like something about monsters? Like
It's not Grendel.
Answer?
monsters.
It's on moral fiction.
Yeah.
On moral fiction is harsh on this innovative fictionist, calling his novels the Sotweed Factor and Giles Goatboy faker than his early work and all but unreadable. Yes. In an earlier statement on the relation of fiction and morality, this author and Cleanth Brooks claimed that a story must have a meaning in moral terms in their textbook Understanding Fiction. This author defended racial segregation in The Briar Patch, his contribution to I'll Take My Stand, but later became an integrationist.
Well, he definitely contributed to
Robert
that.
Warren?
I think it's reasonable.
Warren.
Is that your answer?
Yeah.
That's right, 20. 4. This political faction's hostility to the state was discussed in the papal encyclical Cum Multa by Leo XIII. In one dispute, this faction was opposed by the Chapel Goris. During that conflict, this faction agreed to the Lord Eliot Convention, which regulated treatment of prisoners. At the end of that conflict, this faction sought to protect the traditional fueros by agreeing to the Convention of Vergara. Soldiers nicknamed Requetes were loyal to this faction, which included...
Carlists?
10. Bonus. This suburban community, originally known as Squattersville, inspired Curtis White's novel The Idea of Home, for 10 points each. Named this Bay Area village, one of the first pre-planned communities in the U.S., whose houses for returning World War II servicemen were mass-produced by the David D. Bohannon Company using the California method.
Is it the thing with like the domes? They have like dome houses that is like a 99%.
Answer?
Levittown.
It's San Lorenzo. The techniques used to construct San Lorenzo were later used by this American home builder, whose namesake towns in Pennsylvania and New York are synonymous with mass-produced post-war housing.
Levitt.
Yes. The construction of post-war suburbs was aided by the 1926 Supreme Court case of Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Co., which arose from this state and held that municipal zoning was not a taking under the Fifth Amendment.
All right, 1 in 50 shot. What do you got?
Missouri.
Yeah, let's do that.
Answer?
Missouri.
It's Ohio. So 10. 5. This phenomenon is argued to succeed evolutionarily because it is counterintuitive in a book by Ilka Pusiainen titled For How It Works. Wilfred Cantwell Smith noted that Arabic has no word for this phenomenon and questioned its assumed universality in a book titled For Its Meaning and End. The claims that this phenomenon is solely the creation of the scholar's study by his imaginative acts of comparison and generalization and that it has no existence apart from the academy are found in a book on Imagining It by Jonathan Z. Smith. This phenomenon was the result of the electricity or collective effervescence produced when people gather, according to Emil Durkheim.
Yeah.
Clifford Geertz used the phrase, a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pensive, and long-lasting moods and motivations to describe, for 10 points, what phenomenon that Karl Marx called the opiate... 10. Your bonus. A book by this thinker used the theological form of phenomenology developed in this country to argue that the individual and the community come together via a process of participation, for 10 points each. Named as author of a 1969 book variously translated into English as Person and Act, or The Acting Person. Answer? This is John Paul II. John Paul II's The Acting Person drew from a Polish scholarly tradition of blending phenomenology with the metaphysics of his Italian church doctor, a student of Albertus Magnus who distinguished essence and existence in his extensive commentaries on Aristotle. Answer?
Bonaventure?
Sorry, it's Aquinas.
Yeah.
John Paul II commented on this aspect of the creation, which, according to Aquinas, is present in humanity's capacity to know and love the divine. Aquinas also wrote that this concept mentioned in Genesis was partly lost in the fall of man. Answer?
Love.
This is Image of God. Sorry, nothing on that one. 6. Pieces of this type make up entries C32 to C48 in the Ernst Warburton catalog of the works of Johann Christian Bach. A piece of this type by another composer only survives in an arrangement found in the estate of the composer's biographer Otto Jahn. The arrangement of a piece of this type replaces a flute part with a clarinet, which led Robert Levin to reconstruct the original scoring and to write an investigation of who wrote the piece. That spurious work of this type, numbered K297B, was originally written with solo parts for flute, oboe, horn, and bassoon. The most frequently performed piece in this genre is in E-flat major and requires one soloist to tune the strings a half step higher than usual. The Baroque Concerto Grosso was a predecessor of, for 10 points, what genre popular during the classical period that is scored for multiple soloists and orchestra and exemplified by the one that Mozart wrote featuring violin and viola.
So like a concertant?
Prompt.
Symphonia concertant?
10.
Yeah.
Bonus. Cells are grown on media containing this substance to see if they have been successfully transformed, for 10 points each. Name this sugar analog whose indole substituent, when cleaved, dimerizes to form an intense blue product visualized in the blue-white screen.
X-Gall?
Yes. X-Gall can be used to see if a cell expresses the beta-galactosidase enzyme produced by this inducible operon.
Gluck. Schmack.
That's right. The E. coli enzyme beta-glucuronidase and X-glup are employed in this reporter gene system used to analyze promoter activity.
Oh. It's like bait.
Answer?
Like bait switch.
It's Gus. 20. And this is 7. An essay argues that literature in this language has been judged stripped of its style, leaving its writers like men deprived of their clothes by an earthquake or railway accident. A translator of works in this language, nicknamed NAQT, had an unrequited crush on his collaborator Catherine Mansfield, and a rivalry with an author whose son David wrote Lady into Fox while part of the Bloomsbury Group. A story in this language lays emphasis upon such unexpected places that at first it seems as if there were no emphasis at all, according to an essay that disfavorably compares Ulysses with that story about a dying soldier on a ship. Virginia Woolf's modern fiction discusses literature of this language.
Greek?
-5, sorry. Which Woolf knew through a translator often criticized for skipping or smoothing out difficult passages. British modernism was influenced by translations from this language that Constance Garnett.
Russian.
10. Bonus. One of these authors relinquished the editorship of his newspaper, The New Witness, to the other's brother Cecil, for 10 points each. Name these two Catholic British authors whose close association and shared views, such as their anti-Semitism and advocacy of distributionism, led them often to be referred to by a portmanteau of their two names. One of them dedicated his novel, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, to the other, the author of The Servile State.
Belloc?
So yeah, Belloc's. The Belloc's. Belloc.
Is that your
The
answer?
Belloc.
Sorry, it's Chesterton and Belloc.
Oh, check.
The term Chester Belloc was coined by this author, who faced off with Chesterton in a debate chaired by Belloc. This member of the Fabian Society wrote the play Mrs. Warren's Profession.
Shaw.
Yes. A public debate between Belloc and H.G. Wells inspired this 1925 Chesterton book, which converted C.S. Lewis to Christianity. This book's portrayal of its title figure, Jesus, is a rebuttal to Wells's The Outline of History.
The man who was Thursday?
No.
I don't know. The Holy Fool. The Holy Fool.
Sorry, it's The Everlasting Man. 10.
Jesus was on.
8. When this property holds, the parallel transport of a vector from one path to another is independent of the path taken. This property holds to the first order in Riemann normal coordinates and the local Lorentz frames defined by those coordinates. Birkhoff's theorem states that the vacuum solution of the Einstein field equation must be static and have this property.
Spherically symmetric.
Sorry, -5.
What?
And have this property in the asymptotic limit. This property lends its name to a fine-tuning problem that asks how the initial density of the universe was so close to the critical density. The metric tensor and the inverse metric tensor have the same components when space-time has this property. The pseudo-Riemannian space-time of general relativity reduces to Minkowski space-time when it has this property. For 10 points, give this property of space-times in which the Riemann curvature tensor vanishes.
Flatness.
10.
Protest.
Okay.
Looking up.
And your bonus.
Where's the buzz?
The buzz was at
Before asymptotic.
right before asymptotic limit. Yeah.
It said spherically symmetric.
Spherically symmetric, right. All right, bonus for Columbia. Two players of this instrument collaborated on the album The Great Kai and JJ for 10 points each, named this brass instrument. The appropriately named Slide Hampton also plays this instrument.
Trombone.
Yes. The previously mentioned Kai Winding spent his early career in this band leader's ensemble. This man liked to call his music progressive jazz, and most high school jazz programs today are still modeled after his band clinics. Answer?
Miller.
This is Stan Kenton. Kenton's band scored a hit with a cover of a Cuban song about a vendor of these things. They also appear in the name of a Dizzy Gillespie song about with a recurring octave jump.
Peanuts. Peanuts.
That's right, 20. This is 9. The progenitor of this dynasty displaced the Yaonian clan by being elected ruler. Consorts of this dynasty hailed from the Xiao clan, while rulers of this dynasty were members of the Yelu clan. Like its successor, this dynasty commissioned the creation of both a large script and a small script to write its native language. From the Chateau Turks, this empire received the 16 prefectures. That territory included this empire's southern capital, which stood on the site of modern Beijing. After the demise of this dynasty, Yelu Dashi fled to Central Asia and established a successor state. This empire's ethnically Chinese neighbor agreed to recognize this empire's ruler as a co-equal son of heaven.
The Khitan?
Prompt.
What? The Liao dynasty?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Bonus. This historian appears to have popularized the idea that servants at the banquet of chestnuts kept score of participants' orgasms for 10 points each. Name this American biographer whose 1992 History of Medieval Europe, A World Lit Only by Fire, spread what one reviewer referred to as some of the most gratuitous errors of fact he had ever seen.
American biographer. Isaacson.
Answer?
Isaacson.
This is William Manchester. Manchester fancifully claimed that this notorious pope, whose son Cesare ran the banquet, handed out prizes for the most sexually virile participants after the feast was over.
Alexander VI.
Yes, Manchester also, without any evidence, claimed that a psychopathic pedophile kidnapped and killed 130 children from this German town in 1484. A book about that incident in this town by Wolfgang Nieder stated that its missing children might instead have helped settle Transylvania.
Say it.
Answer?
Nuremberg.
Oh, this is Hamelin.
10.
So 10.
Pied Piper.
Yeah, it's the Pied Piper. And here's toss-up 10. The first half of a 2003 book argues that the theory of this concept faces the problems of reification and displacement and is insufficient to create parity of participation in society. An essay titled for this concept examines Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Immanuel Kant as standard bearers for a difference-blind approach to this concept based on equal dignity that grew out of the collapse of honor-based social hierarchies. In a published exchange with Axel Honneth, Nancy Fraser held that this concept must be coupled with redistribution. Cultural identity should be treated with the politics of this concept, according to an essay in Charles Taylor's book Multiculturalism. The master-slave dialectic described by G.W.F. Hegel is a struggle for this concept, which Hegel argued a self-consciousness needs to receive to exist. For 10 points, identify this act of acknowledging the existence and validity of another person or identity.
Empathy.
Sorry.
Respect.
Sorry, it's recognition. All right, that's the half.
That's accurate.
Yes, yes.
All right, ready for the second half of Penn?
Okay, well, the theorem says that any spherically symmetric solution must have the two properties, so where did he buzz again?
Right before asymptotic.
Well, it also doesn't. The question
doesn't apply to
whether
the
it
previous
includes
clues,
before
though.
that also rule it out, which is another question.
I feel like we shouldn't be resolving the protest in the middle of the game.
I agree with that. We'll do it at the end. Yeah. Well, let's shout it in.
How many points are at issue with the protest?
All right, so it would be a 30, 35, 30, 75.
All right. It's a 75-point protest, so we'll keep that in mind. We will resolve it at the end if it ends up being material. And this is toss-up 11. You ready and ready? All right, toss-up 11. The only indication for aphthmolanitide is for treatment of this condition, which can be diagnosed when urine reacted with a DMAB-containing solution turns red in both the Hosch and Watson-Schwartz tests. This condition can be characterized by the presence of compounds prefixed proto, euro, and copro in the urine and feces.
Like porphyria.
10.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Bonus. A paper title for the strength of these concepts is, at over 47,000 citations, among the most cited in the social sciences, for 10 points each. Name these concepts that, according to the sociologist Mark Granovetter, are chiefly responsible for the embeddedness of an individual within a social network.
Maybe like edges.
Properties.
Answer?
Clicks.
These are weak ties.
Oh.
A classic 1974 Granovetter book studies the process by which 282 Americans use their social ties to engage in networking and achieve this goal, a process social scientists now study using data from Monster and LinkedIn.
Like getting a job. Yeah, getting a job.
That's right. The weak ties hypothesis, under which individuals A and B will likely have a weak tie to one another if they both have strong ties to individual C, was proposed by this social scientist and game theorist who published the 1963 paper Mathematical Models of Social Interaction while teaching at the University of Michigan.
What the fuck is his name? Comes up in all these concepts and stuff.
Answer?
Angerman?
Sorry, this is Anatole Rappaport. So 10.
Oh, okay, he had more famous stuff too.
12. This man left Rochester University to volunteer in the 105th Ohio, spent part of the Civil War in Liddy Prison, and was wounded at First Bull Run. This co-founder of what is now Bennett College may have introduced Ferdinand Lee Barnett to Barnett's future wife, Ida B. Wells. This author of the nationally syndicated column A Bystander's Notes is profiled in a Mark Elliott biography titled for a term this man coined, colorblind society. In the year of his most prominent legal case, this Ohio-born lawyer successfully championed the passage of an anti-lynching bill in Ohio. This attorney, who wrote 2 books that drew on his experiences as a committed Reconstructionist living in Greensboro, North Carolina, was hired on his most prominent case by a citizens committee headed by Louis A. Martinet to represent a man who was 1/8 black. The carpetbagger novels Bricks Without Straw and A Fool...
Turgey.
10.
Next.
Bonus. Unlike coma and other Seidel aberrations, this effect occurs even for objects on the optical axis, for 10 points each. Name this optical aberration in which lenses fail to focus all incoming rays to a single point due to the lens's curvature.
Spherical. Yeah. No, it's not that.
Answer?
Spherical aberration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like astigmatism, spherical aberration is classified as an aberration of this order because this is the lowest order at which the effect appears in the Taylor series expansion of Snell's law.
Okay.
Answer? Sorry?
Second.
Third.
Oh,
To minimize spherical aberration or astigmatism, the image screen can be moved to this position, at which point the diameter of the blurred image is at a minimum.
the focal? Yeah, the focal length.
Answer?
Focal length.
This is the circle of least confusion or the dioptic midpoint. So, 10.
Right.
13. The bottom middle of this artwork is dominated by a curtain that hangs from a wooden frame between two sets of 5 allegorical panels displaying the contrasting images of, among other things, a cannon and a cloud emitting 4 forked bolts, and a crown and a bishop's mitre. This artwork, which exemplifies its artist's form of perspective based on Gerard Desarges' projective geometry, appeared 9 years after a similar piece by Jean Matthias that is divided into panels depicting Libertas, Imperium, and Religio. At the very top of this artwork is a Latin quote from Job 41:33, meaning, "There is no power on earth to be compared to him." This artwork shows a crowned man who is holding a bishop's crozier and a sword, and whose body and arms are...
Like the cover of Leviathan?
Sorry, -5. And whose body and arms are made up of many smaller bodies. Abraham Boss designed for 10 points one engraving that adorns the original title page of Thomas Hobbes' treatise on the matter, form, and power of a commonwealth.
Frontispiece for Leviathan?
10.
Really?
Sorry, specifically not the cover.
Yeah. It's on the inside of the book.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
It specifically is not. And here's your bonus. During the Georgian period, these items were sometimes advertised as walnut cottages, for 10 points each. Name these items that in the Victorian era came to symbolize domestic respectability, such that many women became proficient in their use. Arthur Lesser wrote a social history titled For Men, Women, and These Items.
No idea. What did you say?
Answer?
A piano.
That's right. Johannes Zumpa introduced the piano to this city, where a pianoforte school grew up to write music primarily for amateur female players. Piano makers clustered in Camden Town, north of Charing Cross, in this city.
London.
Yes. The piano's explosion in popularity in London was partly due to this manufacturer, a former apprentice to Swiss harpsichord maker Burkhard Schutte. This man's namesake company invented the square piano in the late 1700s and gifted a model to Ludwig van Beethoven.
I'm guessing Spell.
Play out.
Sorry, it's John Broadwood. 20. 20.
Broadwood, dude. Okay, no, that's a name. I wasn't.
14. In the opening passage, everything seems so small, so near, so wet to this character that he wants to tuck the earth behind a stove. This character voices the ideas of the author's trial lecture on cranial nerves by describing an infinite beauty that passes from form to form in a speech opposing the idealism supported by Christoph Kaufmann. This character wears ash on his face and a sackcloth while attempting to revive a dead child in a nearby village. The opening pages of Capitalism and Schizophrenia cite a passage in which this character walks in the mountains as an example of a schizophrenic out for a stroll. The novella title for this character begins with him traveling to stay with Pastor Oberlin, whose real-life diary entries about this man's time with him provide the basis of the work. For 10 points, name this Sturm und Drang author, whose mental breakdown is the subject of an innovative novella fragment by
Novels.
Sorry, -5. By Georg Buchner.
Wojciech.
Sorry, it's Lens.
I don't know.
15. According to one text, a mortal version of this god disguised himself as a lyre-playing musician to steal a foodstuff that gave superhuman strength because it contained the venom of 3 snakes. That human aspect of this god, who is famed for eloquence, helped an inarticulate king named Helgi woo Thora, the daughter of Kuza. This figure cut off Mjolnir at the hilt during a battle with Thor, and wrested a magic sword and bracelet from the satyr Miming, according to the third book of the Gesta Danorum. In that text, Saxo portrays this god as a hero who slays his rival for the hand of Gewar's daughter, Nana.
Wait, so Boulder.
Oh, sorry, -5. In a poem named for another figure's dreams, a vulva foretells that the giantess Rind will bear a son whose only purpose is to slay this god on the day of his birth. This figure was killed by Vali in retribution for his participation in a game where objects were hurled at a supposedly invulnerable god. For 10 points, what blind son of Odin and Frigg was tricked by Loki into using mistletoe to kill his twin brother Balder? Bonus. This company's founder was killed in a 1967 plane crash while en route to marrying for what would have been the 23rd time, for 10 points each. Name this company that grew exponentially after its founder was rewarded with an exclusive government contract for offering financial support during a successful 1964 coup attempt.
1964. Okay, birds are true in 64. Like something like the East.
Answer?
Lloyd's of London.
So this is the Bin Laden Group. The Bin Laden Group made good on its exclusive government contract in the 1960s, construction of Highway 15, which connected Yemen to this city. Osama bin Laden was incensed by rumors that the Saudis allowed French special forces to enter this city's Grand Mosque to expel radical occupiers in 1979.
The Grand Mosque is? It's in NAQT.
That's right. Until the late 1960s, the Bin Laden Group had the exclusive contract to renovate this holy site, a mosque that shares its name with the militant wing of the Fatah Party.
Oh. What's the answer? No.
Answer? This is the Sorry?
Fedayeen.
This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Oh, fuck.
Not to be confused with the Al-Aqsa Martyrs.
Martyrs Brigades, yeah.
That was 15. Let's get a 3/4 mark score check.
That's right.
Okay. Move Penn up by 35.
Yeah.
This is 16. The risk of hydrocarbon backstreaming in these devices has led to a shift away from the use of oil in them, both as a lubricant and as a method to transfer kinetic energy. One type of these devices uses a high voltage to trap particles as a film on a titanium getter plate, while the Roots type uses two rotors that counter-rotate cyclically without touching. The first type of these devices to have no moving parts was independently developed by Gata and Langmuir and sprayed jets of mercury vapor from a nozzle. The weaker roughing type is commonly used prior to a more advanced type, such as the ion or cryo one, the latter of which traps incoming molecules by freezing them. After using the earliest type of these devices on a pair of bulls, Otto von Guericke demonstrated that teams of horses were unable to pull the bulls apart. For 10 points, name these devices that reduce the pressure inside...
Vacuum pump?
10. Bonus. In a poem titled For a Journey of this kind, the speaker sees his own image on the gallows tree and implores Venus to give me the strength to contemplate my own heart, my own body without hate, for 10 points each. Name this type of journey that the poet claimed leads to knowledge that makes the world an oasis of horror in a desert of boredom. A third poem about one of these journeys describes a place that is abundant, calm, voluptuous.
Voyages? Voyage?
Answer?
On the sea, a sea voyage.
What's your answer?
A sea voyage.
I'm going to take it. The answer is voyages. The poems Voyage to Cythera, The Voyage, and Invitation to the Voyage all appear in the 1861 collection of This Book of Poetry by Charles Baudelaire. Yes. Baudelaire's The Swan opens by telling this mythical woman, I think of you. The speaker informs her that the false Simois swollen by your tears made him see that old Paris is no more as he crossed the new carousel. 30.
Good job.
17. The city of Philadelphia is the focal point of a book arguing that a group earned this status, using the example of the transubstantiation of the revolutionary John Binns. The argument that acquiring this status required the scapegoating of women, thus producing unease about the strict role of mothers and daughters seen as princesses, is central to Karen Brodkin's book about how another group acquired this status.
Whiteness.
Fuck.
Whiteness. That's right. Here's a bonus. To illustrate these constructs, the author applies them to Baron Liebig's investigations of death by metal poisoning, for 10 points each. What 5 tools for identifying causal relationships consist of ones of agreement, difference, concomitant variations, and residues, and a joint one that combines agreement and difference? Answer?
Heuristic.
These are Mill's methods.
Oh.
The method of agreement introduced in Mill's A System of Logic is aimed at showing that a condition has this property, while the method of difference is aimed at establishing a sufficient condition. A condition that is both this and sufficient creates an if and only if relationship.
Necessary?
Yes. A System of Logic lays out Mill's direct reference theory of these terms, which holds that the meaning of one of them is only its referent. Saul Kripke disputed the descriptivist theory of these terms, which associates their meaning with a collection of descriptions.
Names.
20. This is 18. John Ciardi's poem about this event states that its subjects did so well we thrill to the performance, and that it is old school custom to pretend to be sad when we think about it. That poem about this event uses a 36-line form called the Trenta Se that was invented by Ciardi. A poem about this event tells its addressee that the violet was your favorite flower. That John Logan poem about this event quotes an epitaph reading, "Here lies one whose name was writ on water." Before this event, its subject noted how it might deprive him of huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and that the fairy power of unreflecting love in a sonnet that ends, "On the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink." This event, the subject of the sonnet, "When I have fears that I may cease to..."
It's like, Keats's death.
10.
Nice.
Good.
Your bonus. This theorem is proven by taking two arbitrary states, applying the same unitary operation to both, and showing that the two states originally must have been either orthogonal or identical to each other, for 10 points each. Identify this theorem that states that duplicating arbitrary quantum information is impossible.
No cloning. No cloning.
Yes. The no cloning theorem is typically applied to these units of quantum information. These units make these quantum analogs of bits are often visualized with the Bloch sphere.
Qubits.
Yes. To recover information in qubits distorted by quantum noise, this mathematician devised one of the first quantum error-correcting codes. His namesake algorithm can factor large integers and thus breaks RSA cryptography in polynomial time.
There's a short code and a short algorithm.
Yeah, sure.
Short.
30.
Yeah.
Huh.
All right. Let's make sure that this is correct with 2 questions left.
Sharks Nest 185, it sure is. Hey!
All right. 19. A film set in this country briefly switches to black and white to show mice on the moon after a group of boys tie one of the animals by its tail to a red balloon and send it up into the sky. In that film set in this country, James explores a half-built house before climbing through a window and running into a golden field beyond. A film set in this country opens with abstract circular shapes that eventually reveal a human eye as a female voice speaks random syllables that gradually form words. That film set in this country shows men removing their clothes as they approach the protagonist in a pitch-black scene, only to sink into a dark pool and become husk-like shells. This is the setting of Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher, and a film in which an alien disguised as a woman preys on men, Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin. A monologue in a film set in this country begins, choose life, choose a job, choose a career. For 10 points, what country is the setting of Danny Boyle's Train Spotting, which follows heroin addicts in Edinburgh?
Scotland.
Okay. Your bonus. This lecture examines how language is actually employed to keep thought at bay in the use of phrases like American people, for 10 points each. Identify the speech published as Art, Truth, and Politics that was videotaped for a 2005 ceremony that its speaker was not able to attend. This lecture's excoriation of American foreign policy is emblematic of its British author's late political activism.
Pinter's Nobel acceptance speech.
That's right. Pincher's lecture repeats the phrase, "We were assured that was true. It was not," in discussing the justifications for British involvement in this conflict. David Hare, who introduced Pincher's lecture on British TV, wrote a play about this 2003 conflict titled Stuff Happens.
The invasion of Iraq.
Prompt.
War.
Yeah, that's
Iraq War.
Thomas Ostermeyer used Fallujah, Iraq as the setting up for this 2005 staging, for his 2005 staging of this 1995 Sarah Kane play set in a hotel room in a war zone. This play's infamous scenes include one in which an unnamed soldier sucks Ian's eyeballs out and eats them.
Blast.
Sorry?
Blast.
It's blasted.
Blasted.
All right,
2195, yeah.
2195? This is last toss-up. This group, to which the Nihil Novi law granted the power of common consent.
Like Sloshka?
That is correct. So, 20 or more to win. Here's your bonus. In 2012, this man was hired to study and manage the virtual economies of Valve's video games. For 10 points each, name is author of The Global Minotaur, whose 2017 book, Adults in the Room, discussed his difficulties in coming to agreement with fellow finance ministers in the European Union. Answer? Sorry?
Lawson.
This is Yanis Varoufakis. Varoufakis served as Greece's finance minister for about 7 months under this political party, formed from a left-wing coalition and led by Alex Tsipras, which failed to accomplish its election goals of ending EU-imposed austerity.
Syriza?
Yes.
Yeah.
This country is the title Global Minotaur of Varoufakis' 2011 book. Varoufakis traces the precarity of the world economy to this country assuming a dominant role in the Bretton Woods arrangement, which was thrown into chaos when this country abandoned the gold standard in 1971.
The U.S.?
20.